In the dim background of our mind, we know what we ought to be doing, but somehow we cannot start. Every moment we expect the spell to break, but it continues, pulse after pulse. This quote is by William James, a philosopher and a psychologist in the 1800s, and he spoke of the curious problem that underpins most of the challenges today. He suggests that we know better, but for some reason, we are not doing better, and much of our unhappiness lies in the contrast. Why? Well, because we know better. We know we should eat better, but we often don't, and we're paying the price of poor eating habits. We know the importance of sleep, but we're staying up too late, only to be burned out the following day. And even perhaps we know that we should treat each other with more kindness, but we often feel guilty for the things we did or did not say. Knowing better, but not doing better. We have highly profitable industries whose very business model seems to rely on the knowing better but not doing better tendency of people. Two such industries are the fitness and personal development industry. Now, the health club industry is an $87 billion a year industry, and the weight loss industry is around $72 billion. It has been estimated that out of all the gym memberships purchased, only 18% will use them, and out of the 18%, only half will go more than 100 times out of the year. And as far as the weight loss industry, well, they only showed about a 5 to 10% long-term success rate in people keeping the weight off. They're selling knowing better, but not doing better. How about personal development? Well, if you look at personal development on Amazon, it will tell you that there are over 90,000 plus books on self-help. It is a $11 billion a year industry in the US alone. A country who also spends $210 billion a year on depression and issues related to depression. Clearly, we are facing some big problems in our world, and we're seemingly unable to do better despite the massive amount of information, resources, and support that seem to be available. So what is the answer? How do we bridge the gap between knowing better and doing better? Well, would it surprise you to know that I found an answer in the most unlikely of places, between the pages of a Dr. Seuss book, Green Eggs and Ham. For those of you not familiar with the book Green Eggs and Ham, it is a story of a young character named Sam I Am, who is trying to convince an older, grumpy guy to eat, well, green eggs and ham. Now, it wasn't the green eggs and ham that held the answer. Now, wouldn't that be weird? But it was his name, Sam. Sam became the acronym that I used to help my fitness clients recover from injuries faster, help them develop their own core stability with greater accuracy, which not only reduced the risk of injury, but also dramatically increased the positive effects of exercise. With this process, not only could they now know better, they did better. SAM also became the acronym that I used for clients trying to improve their mindset, so they weren't fighting their own internal dialogue, teaching them how to go from knowing better to doing better here and here. Well, let's start with the fitness industry. Why so many failures with people sticking with the plan? Well, there are numerous reasons why, but one big one stands out for me over the years, and it's one of physical illiteracy. Now, if you grew up in a farm setting like myself, and 50 years ago, the life we lived had a tremendous amount of physical activity and movement built into it. We had about an acre of garden, which we had to look after. My father owned a construction company, so we had plenty of cheap labor, and we had acres and acres of fields and forests to play in. Now, why this is important is that when we move, our body stores the how to move memory in different parts of our brain collectively, called our procedural memory. Our procedural memory is useful when we need to tie our shoes or ride a bike or hit a ball. We can access this information without having to think about it as we repeated the process over and over again and now can do it unconsciously. So what if you have limited experience with exercise? Well, your procedural memory banks would be limited with the experience on how to move. When I work with clients in my facility, I would ask two important questions. What are you training and where do you feel that? And I would get the following responses. I'm training my abs, but it hurts my face. I love doing push-ups, but I don't ever feel it in my shoulders. Never my chest. I'm training my back, but I only ever feel it in my arms. Well, this was the response from most people I would see day to day. My breakthrough in understanding how to help people gain control happened at the beginning of my studies around the mechanisms of injury and movement. And there are two things that changed the way I looked at exercise and mindset forever. The first was a single sentence from a book I was studying that read, Stimulation of cutaneous sensors evokes a prior related experience to aid in the formation of a perception. Amazing, right? And you have no idea what that means. What that meant was that when the sensors in my skin feel pressure, they go into my procedural memory banks looking for information on what this could mean and what to do next, based on what I have done and experienced in the past. So if I was trying to do a rowing exercises to strengthen my back muscles, but I've never lifted anything heavier than perhaps a coffee cup, then my brain is going to have to use the next best thing. My memory of whatever pulling type movements have been done before, like perhaps opening the fridge or reaching for a glass and bringing it to my mouth to drink. In order to succeed in that exercise, I would have to build a whole new set of references for my nervous system to utilize. Now, what happened next pulled it all together as I was teaching a new client who happened to struggle with incontinence. Now, I was a young trainer at the time, and I didn't realize that incontinence meant bladder weakness. I thought it meant living further inland, incontinent. And I was showing her how to do a standing rowing exercise. And the very first thing I had to do was flex her pelvic floor at the base of her core. I also had a forearm injury at the time, so any type of pulling exercise was uncomfortable for me, because when I was demonstrating this exercise, I would take my body to the exact same sequence I wanted her to replicate, flexing my pelvic floor first. And I was surprised to find that the pulling exercise that would normally bother my forearm did not. When I relaxed my pelvic floor at the base of my core, the pain came back. So over the next few weeks, I practiced with a series of exercises, and not only did I find that all the movements I was working with seemed more stable by contracting my pelvic floor first, but it made it easier to access the right muscles. Make sense? No core strength or activation, no progress, no strength at all. Now think about what happens when we have an injury. We have apprehension about that body part because of the painful reminder that it's injured. Now we have a new procedural memory of that area of the body, one that has pain and apprehension attached to it. So in order to overcome that particular injured memory, we had to design a new one, a more stable place from which to build from, without the memory of the original injury connected to it. Are you with me? So the S and sound became the cue to stabilize, which meant that in every exercise, the pelvic floor was active. Not only was the ability to stabilize our center of gravity important, but to do so by thinking, by feeling, and then doing the movement each time. By doing so, we're adding valuable information to our procedural memory banks. The A was to activate, which meant to focus on the target muscle after you turned your core on. And to focus means to know where it is and what it feels like to flex it. And sometimes we'd have to spend time practicing flexing a weaker muscle or muscle group to get a sense of what it felt like before we actually did the exercise. Now, why this is important is now we have an internal feeling reference that tells us when we're doing better and when we're not. When I lose the connection, the feeling, I stop, reset, regain control, feel the feeling, and then start again. M stands for move. So I focus on turning on my core first, stabilizing my spine. I know what I'm doing. I know I'm doing better because I feel it. Then I focus on the target muscles and think about them specifically and feel them. And as I flex and feel the target muscles, now I can move safely and with accuracy. So I wondered if Sam could help people rewire the memories created in the mind from physical injuries the same way perhaps we could do with emotional injuries. We see and interpret the world based on our memories and act based on those feelings we derive from those memories. So it stands to reason that if we could create new ideas, new ways of thinking, that would create new ways of feeling, then we would act differently. I mean, you see, I had numerous challenges throughout my life, from a traumatic brain injury to my right temporal lobe, to growing up in an alcoholic and angry environment, dealing with abuse on many levels, to living on the street. So my use of drugs over the years made me feel better. I didn't have any positive emotional role models when I was younger, so unlike the immense amount of physical experience I had growing up, I was lacking in positive emotional experiences, something I needed to create consciously. I was physically strong, but emotionally weak. I needed to sand my mindset. So when it comes to our emotional side of who we are, what comes forward when we're dealing with things that are emotionally charged is a surge of uncomfortable feelings that are generated when an older memory is being accessed, often from a time when we are less emotionally mature. Like our memories surrounding movement that are stored in our procedural memory, our life history is stored in our episodic memory. The problem is that we don't often recognize where the feelings are coming from. We just experience them without realizing we're taking a current situation and then responding from the injured feelings of our younger self. Do you think that'd be somewhat disorientating? I think that's where the expressions come from, like, that is so unlike him, or that is totally a character for her. How many of you can relate? So let's see how I'd use Sam to stabilize myself mentally and emotionally. So the essence of Sam is to stabilize. In the context of our personal, emotional life, we need to develop a strong emotional core to make our way through the world. So we're less reactive and we can make better decisions. I chose truth, courage, and compassion as the basis of my emotional core. It's not enough to know what they mean. You also have to know how they feel and where you feel them when you're connected to them. When I think of truth, I just feel in my head like knowledge. But when I encourage the truth, I feel in my stomach kind of as excitement, a bit of nervousness. And when I act compassionate, I feel it in my chest. So when I'm struggling, I think about what my core traits are and then allow myself to feel what they mean. I just got to remember to flex that muscle. The A in Sam is now looking at the actions we're wanting to take, whether it's to go to university or get a job or get married or end a relationship. Do you think things will turn out better if we first stabilize ourselves by accessing our strong emotional core before we open our mouth or before we made a decision? Now, the decisions may not be always easier, but they'll probably aim us in the right direction and cause the least amount of chaos in our lives. Now that we have chosen or stabilizing emotions, we can now look through that lens, actually aligning both the emotional core and the feelings attached to the decisions we wish to make. Confident that the movement of our life comes from a place of certainty because we now know who we are emotionally and we can trust that what we feel and what we decide to do in life comes from a stable place inside of us, our strong emotional core. You just got to learn to flex that muscle. Thank you, Sam I Am.